morning. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danie Laurel. It's the start of a new trading week. Let's go straight to our top story. Philippine Airlines has filed its Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the United States. Now, while many people are worried that the company might be going out of business, history tells us that the filing might actually bode well for the flag carrier. Regina Lay gives us the lowdown in this report.
No, Philippine Airlines isn't going out of business. It's also not being split up or being sold to investors, at least not yet. In fact, what the Chapter 11 filing does is it buys the company time to reorganize its finances so that it can remain open for business while unable to pay its debts. The country's flag carrier has been losing money for a few years now, and the COVID-19 pandemic dealt a really heavy blow. In 2020, the airline reported a net loss of 73 billion pesos. So imagine, not only was it not making any money, it also had to keep paying its bills, for example, for aircraft maintenance and leasing. By declaring itself bankrupt, Philippine Airlines got out of paying hundreds of millions of dollars in debt and was also given new funding to keep running. In the US, a few companies have emerged stronger after their Chapter 11 filing. For example, car companies like General Motors and Chrysler, which were hit hard by the 2008 financial crisis. Philippine Airlines says it will have to let go of about 23 planes and cut some long-haul routes, but it will continue to honor all tickets, travel vouchers, refunds, and Mabuhay Miles benefits. It will also continue repatriation flights for OFWs stranded worldwide. Regina Lay, One News.
And here to discuss with us the implication of this filing on our flag carrier, we have with us Tina Ulang, Head of Research for Metro Investments. Good morning, ma'am. Tina, welcome back.
Hi. Hi, good morning, Danie. Happy to be here. Morning.
Ma'am Tina, as we were discussing offline, filing pa lang to, no? So it has not yet been approved. But is this as good as approved? And can you say that this was the best option for PAL? Of course, a lot of outlets had already been reporting that this would likely happen. But here it is. Can you give us more of an idea whether you think this is a good route and why it would be done in the United States?
Mhm. This is a listed company, PAL Holdings, and I think the message to investors is that it's on its way to recovery. That's the biggest news now because of the breakthrough deal that was clinched. And I think this is going to be good for this entity, which is really part of our nation building. It has a strategic value to our economy. This ensures that we retain our connectivity with the rest of the world because PAL operates as a long haul flight, and it's good that we get to retain such a big entity, and in ensuring that it's in a better shape because the reality of the travel industry has changed. The pandemic, the Delta variant has changed so many variables within the operating environment, like demand, consumer behavior has changed, and then the health protocols, that so many things need to be observed, the testing, and then the quarantine. So the travel industry and aviation has become more complicated, and of course PAL has to be relevant and has to be fitter and more efficient given the new operating environment. I think this is a new beginning for PAL, reduced balance sheet, reduced leverage, and fresh capital infusion from all the stakeholders, stockholders, the banks, and it's good for everybody. And I think once this gets implemented, it's going to signal to the world that the aviation industry of the Philippines is able to bounce back. This is going to be a good template for distressed firms, and really the very good execution of the stockholders with the rest of the creditors. This is a good development really for PAL, and a good signal for the Philippine economy as a whole and for the investors.
Ma'am, can you expect any more growth if this does push through? They will be, of course, as you mentioned, reducing their debt. There's a new equity infusion, but at the same time, the fleet will be cut by 25% necessarily. They're returning 20 aircrafts. They've already cut, even before this filing, 35% of the workforce. What makes it seem that these numbers and the reduced operations will bode well for this carrier?
Mhm. I think it's a question of scale. What's the appropriate quantum of scale, operating scale for PAL? And given the demand dynamics of the travel industry, the aviation industry, and the global economic recovery as a whole, PAL has to really reshape its operating scale, and doing it by way of a reduction in some of the drugs on the operations, like your debt, like the asset size. Given the reduced demand, it has to be positioning in a different way. And this is also not very unique to PAL. It is something that the realities of the industry has changed. It is something that most airlines will have to cope with. And until we emerge from this pandemic, then we cannot really see a very strong revival for the travel industry. It's really the virus and the pandemic and the economic crisis that this has caused, which has changed the uh, the dynamics of the industry, and therefore airlines and the players will have to change the way they operate. They will have to redefine their objectives and mission. Are they going to stick to being a long haul flight operator, or are they going to be just concentrating on the mass market? Cebu Air is on the mass market. Uh, uh, PAL is a bigger scale, playing the big league, and since the industry has changed, then it has to change. It has to reduce, and this is a good signal, a new beginning for PAL.
Ma'am, can you really say that it was simply because of the pandemic that caused this? Because losses have been there since pre-pandemic, so since 2017. But of course, this year has been dramatically bad for PAL. Last year, they were down 17% in terms of their shares. So tell us, would this be business as usual, since even before the pandemic, they were already struggling to even break even?
I think the pandemic has just aggravated what has been a very difficult period for PAL even before the virus struck, and it requires that management redefines the business model that it wants to use, to adopt, and this is looking to be a very big reality check for the management. They will have to redefine their objectives, their mission, the market that they're going to operate, given the new realities on the ground. And the pandemic is a big eye opener, and jump starting the way management should look into the uh, new dynamics of the industry. And it's not only PAL, it's all airlines of the world that are now going to be doing their own reshaping of the operations and the target markets that they're going to be going into.
Ma'am, the stock has been suspended at 6 pesos and 5 centavos since June 17 of this year. Tell us, how do investors value PAL right now? Is there a reevaluation going on? How can we even have a target price for this once this suspension is lifted? And when do you think, what would be the reaction if and when this suspension is lifted?
Mm. I think the very important feature of this development is really that PAL continues to retain the business, continues to be in operating mode, and will not suspend operation. And that is a very good signal to investors, because we are investing in a company that continues to operate, and it's on demand, on the healing mode. It's able to continue using a different set of ratios that they need to comply with as agreed with the creditors, and then having a streamlined and a more robust balance sheet that with reduced debt burdens, and that allows the company to realistically operate in the new environment. I think the key here is the capital injection that is required, and then the more realistic levels of uh, debt burden that can be serviced by the new reduced scale of operation. I think that is the key to recovery, the capital injection.
What about other airlines, particularly Cebu Pacific, which is of course also listed and has seen losses, as well as of course Air Asia. It's not listed, but nevertheless, how would this impact? Do you expect others to follow, and not just airlines, but those heavily hit? Will they start filing for Chapter 11?
Mhm. Definitely not, because the budget carriers are operating in the budget in the mass market. So this is a different kind uh, operators. Cebu Air is a budget carrier, caters to the more robust domestic market, very cost efficient, and then very competitive pricing, and leaner and has enjoyed a very good capitalization of late. They have raised a lot of money, 40-45 billion, very creative in terms of the funding, and they're reducing their cost, their monthly cash burn, and that's very critical to the survival of the airline industry. But you see that we are going into granular lockdown, and the travel, the ban on the entry of foreign travelers is about to happen, and this is very good timing for the mass market centered budget carriers like Cebu Pacific, Air Asia. They're on a different market segment, and I think it is not comparable with PAL, because PAL caters to the business travel, and as you see, we have Zoom meetings, and the businessmen are not really going in and out of the country, making a lot of travel. It's really focused on the long haul flight. That's why there is really a need to restructure and redefine its market, where it wants to go, the mission, and then with the newly injected capital and the agreement with the creditors, I think it's on its way to recovery. That's the good news about PAL.
Tell us about whether this would affect our local banks, and the fact that all of this debt restructuring is going to be happening.
Mhm. Yes, of course, the NPLs will rise because, but it will vary per bank. The bigger ones have secured exposure, and that is going to take care of the asset quality recovery. But as a whole, it is minimal. It's small. It's not something that is systemic, and you have this bankruptcy filing, and the company continues to operate. So. Everything is set in such a way that the participants in this deal are the interests of them are secured by the deal, and the good thing is really PAL continues to operate, and we have this strategic flight carrier, this carrier that is here to serve us, and we get to keep the name. It's part of our history, it's part of our nation building, and we retain it. It continues to exist, and that's really very good for investors and for the country as a whole.
Okay, so best option right now for PAL, but also for the banks. And as you mentioned, you do not expect the other airlines to be following suit, at least not for now. This as our markets open down by 2.44 points to 6894.69. Thank you so much for those insights, Tina Ulang of First Metro Investments.
Thank you.
As mentioned, we do see our index down by 6 points and 40 centavos, 6.40 rather, that's at 6890.73. You can see on my terminal here, very quick peek at which ones are leading the charge. LTG Group up by 2 and 6/10%, followed by Bloomberry and Jollibee Foods. But you do have a lot sitting out this rally: SM Investments and PLDT Incorporated, the biggest losers of this morning. Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. Analysts say that inflation likely quickened in August and settled above the Bangko Central's official target range. A Businessworld poll of 16 analysts yielded a median estimate of 4.4% for August inflation, near the lower end of the 4.1 to 4.9% estimate given by the Bangko Central. Now, if realized, headline inflation would gain or breach the central bank's 2 to 4% annual target range after slowing to 4% in July. It will also be the quickest in 3 months, or since the 4.5% recorded in May. Analysts say the weaker peso likely affected imports of raw materials for basic commodities, which in turn led to a faster rise in the CPI in August. The PSA will release August inflation data tomorrow. Now, the DILG says it's all systems go for the granular lockdown strategy that's set to start on Wednesday. That is, of course, if President Duterte approves the proposal to completely do away with region-wide lockdowns. Interior Secretary for Barangay Affairs, Martin Dino, says various agencies are prepared to make granular lockdowns work. He said the DSWD will provide food packs to the affected families, while barangay health emergency response teams continue to monitor areas with COVID-positive cases. And that's a first look into the business day. Today is Monday, September 6, 2021. Catch Business World Live for the market close. It's at 3:15 p.m. today. I'm Danie Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.